The phone buzzed at exactly 6:00 a.m., dragging me from the kind of deep sleep you only get when you've been working 16-hour days for 3 weeks straight. My name's Tom Harlan, and I've been swinging hammers and running electrical wire through old New England houses for the better part of 20 years. My hands are permanently stained with sawdust, and my back aches in places I didn't know existed when I was 25. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. But none of that prepared me for the text message that would change everything. Sorry, no signal. Just saw your message. I stared at the screen, my wife Lena's name glowing in the dim morning light filtering through our bedroom curtains. The Victorian house we'd bought 15 years ago creaked and settled around me like it was holding its breath. Since when does Greg Dalton have bad cell service at his fancy downtown condo? That's what I should have texted back. That's what any normal husband would have texted back. Instead, I sat there on the edge of our bed, listening to Lena shower in the bathroom down the hall, and felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Because I knew exactly where she'd spent the night. I scrolled up through our message history. Yesterday at 11:47 p.m., I'd texted her, "Working late again? Chinese food in the fridge when you get home." Simple. Normal. The kind of message you send your wife of 18 years when she's putting in extra hours at her HR job at MedTech Solutions. Except Lena hadn't been working late. I padded downstairs in my boxers and work boots. Yeah, I sleep in my boots sometimes when I'm too tired to care. And found 2 suitcases sitting by our front door, packed, zipped, ready to go. "Lena," I called up the stairs. The shower kept running. I opened the first suitcase, her good clothes, the black dress she wore to company parties, the blue sweater that brought out her eyes. Underwear I hadn't seen in months, all of it folded with the kind of precision that comes from planning, not panic. The second suitcase held her laptop, charging cables, and a jewelry box I'd given her for our 10th anniversary. The one with the inscription that now felt like a joke. "To my best friend, and the love of my life." My phone buzzed again. "Can we talk when I get home? There's something I need to tell you." I laughed. Actually laughed out loud in our empty living room, surrounded by 18 years of shared furniture and family photos. The sound echoed off the hardwood floors I'd refinished myself 3 summers ago. "Since when do you need to tell me anything?" I typed back. Then I deleted it. Instead, I wrote, "Sure, I'll make coffee." But I wasn't going to make coffee. I was going to sit in my workshop behind the house and think about the last 3 months. About all those late nights, about how Lena had started dressing better for work, about how she'd suddenly become interested in real estate, specifically downtown condos, about my oldest friend Greg Dalton, who sold real estate and lived in a downtown condo and had been texting my wife at all hours of the day and night. The shower stopped running. I grabbed my coffee mug, the one that said "World's Okayest Husband" that Lena had given me as a joke last Christmas, and headed out to my workshop. The morning air was crisp with that October bite that meant winter was coming whether we were ready or not. My workshop used to be a carriage house back when this neighborhood was full of professors and doctors instead of contractors and nurses. I'd converted it into my own little kingdom, workbenches along 2 walls, tool chests organized with the kind of obsessive precision that drives my wife crazy, and a small office area where I handled the business side of Harlan construction. Used to drive my wife crazy, I corrected myself. I fired up my laptop and did something I'd never done in 18 years of marriage. I logged into our cell phone account and pulled up the usage records. What I found made my coffee taste like ash. 3 months of calls, hundreds of text messages, location data that showed Lena's phone spending nights at Greg's address on Elm Street. The address I'd helped him move into 2 years ago when he was going through his own messy divorce. The irony, I muttered to my empty workshop. I heard Lena's car start in our driveway. She was leaving for work early again, or leaving for Greg's place. At this point, the distinction seemed academic. My phone buzzed one more time. Love you. We'll figure this out. I set the phone down and looked around my workshop. At the half-finished kitchen cabinets for the Morrison job. At the blueprints for the bathroom renovation on Maple Street. At 20 years of honest work and steady income and the kind of life that used to feel like enough. Then I picked up my phone and started making a list. Not a honey-do list or a materials list or a timeline for the Henderson Deck project. This was different. This was a list of everyone who needed to know that Greg Dalton and Lena Harlan had been playing house behind my back for 3 months. Starting with Sophie Martinez, Lena's best friend and the biggest gossip in our entire zip code. I was done being the last to know. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been the happiest idiot in Massachusetts. We were at Mark and Sarah's annual barbecue, the kind of neighborhood party where everyone brings a dish and drinks too much beer and argues about the Patriots until someone's wife makes them switch to safer topics like local politics. I was manning the grill because that's what I always do at these things. Give me meat and fire and I'm useful. Give me small talk about interest rates and school board elections and I start looking for the nearest exit. Lena was holding court by the picnic table, telling some story about her boss that had Sophie and 3 other women laughing like she was performing stand-up comedy. She looked good that night. Really good. The kind of good that made other men notice and made me feel proud to be the guy who got to drive her home. Your wife's got the whole crowd wrapped around her finger, Greg said, appearing beside me with a fresh beer and that easy smile that had been charming people since we were in high school together. She always did like an audience, I replied, flipping burgers and trying not to notice how Greg's eyes kept drifting back to Lena. Greg Dalton had been my best friend for 25 years. We'd played football together at Springfield High, gotten drunk together in college, been each other's best man at our respective weddings. When his marriage fell apart 2 years ago, I'd been the one who helped him move out of his house and into that downtown condo. I'd listened to him complain about his ex-wife for months and offered the kind of loyal friendship that you don't question because it's just always been there. She's looking particularly radiant tonight, Greg continued, and something in his tone made me look up from the grill. He was staring at Lena with an expression I'd never seen before. Hungry, calculating, like she was a house he was thinking about buying. Yeah, well, 18 years of marriage will do that, I said, trying to keep things light. 18 years, Greg repeated. That's a long time to be with the same person. Not long enough, I said, and meant it. At the time. The party got louder as the sun went down and the beer kept flowing. Someone had hooked up a playlist to a Bluetooth speaker, and couples were dancing on Mark's back deck. I was cleaning the grill and packing up leftover burgers when I noticed Lena and Greg by the fence, talking in low voices. Nothing unusual about that. Greg had always been part of our social circle. He'd been to our house for dinner dozens of times. He knew Lena's work stories and her opinions about everything from Netflix shows to local restaurant recommendations. But something was different that night. Maybe it was the way Lena touched his arm when she laughed. Maybe it was how Greg leaned in closer when she talked, like he was afraid of missing a single word. Maybe it was the fact that they'd been standing in that same spot for 20 minutes, while everyone else mingled and moved around the party. "Tom," Mark called from the deck, "get over here and settle an argument about the Red Sox." I looked back at Lena and Greg. She was showing him something on her phone, their heads bent together like conspirators. "Coming," I called back, and forced myself to walk away. The Red Sox argument lasted another hour. By the time I looked around for Lena again, she was helping Sophie clear plates, and Greg was nowhere to be seen. "Ready to head home?" I asked, sliding my arm around Lena's waist. "Actually," she said, not quite meeting my eyes, "Sophie asked me to help her with something. Girl stuff. Would you mind if I stayed a little longer? You could take my car and I'll get a ride home later." "Girl stuff. At 11 o'clock at night." "Right." "Sure," I said. "Just don't stay out too late. We've got that thing with your parents tomorrow." "What thing with my parents?" I stared at her. Brunch. For your dad's birthday. We've had it planned for 2 weeks. Oh, right. Of course. She kissed my cheek, and I caught a whiff of cologne that wasn't mine. I'll be home soon. I drove home alone in Lena's Honda, listening to talk radio and telling myself I was being paranoid. So what if Greg had been paying attention to my wife? So what if she'd wanted to stay and help Sophie with some mysterious girl stuff? So what if she'd forgotten about her own father's birthday brunch? People forget things. People have conversations with friends. People help each other clean up after parties. People don't necessarily cheat on their husbands of 18 years with their husband's best friend. Except, sometimes they do. I was asleep when Lena got home that night. Or pretending to be asleep. I heard her car in the driveway around 1:30 a.m. I heard her trying to be quiet on the stairs, trying not to wake me up as she slipped into bed. I heard her whisper, "Sorry," into the darkness. At the time, I thought she was apologizing for being late. Now I know better. Mrs. Krantz from next door has lived in her house for 47 years and knows everyone's business within a 6-block radius. She's 83 years old, walks with a cane, and has the kind of sharp eyes that don't miss anything. Most people in the neighborhood consider her a busybody. I've always thought of her as a valuable intelligence asset. "Morning, Tom," she called from her front porch as I loaded tools into my truck. It was a Tuesday, 3 days after I'd found those suitcases and started putting pieces together. "Morning, Mrs. Krantz. How are you feeling today?" "Oh, can't complain, though I didn't sleep well. Too much activity in the neighborhood, if you know what I mean." I paused, my hand on the truck door. "Activity?" "Cars coming and going at all hours. That friend of yours, Greg, he's been quite busy lately. His fancy BMW was parked outside your house again last night around midnight. Then it left and came back this morning around 5:30. My blood went cold. "You sure it was Greg's car?" "Honey, I've been watching cars in this neighborhood since before you were born. I know a BMW when I see one, and I know your friend's license plate. Starts with GRD, doesn't it? Vanity plates. Always thought those were a bit much." GRD. Greg Robert Dalton. "Mrs. Krantz," I said carefully, "how long have you been seeing Greg's car around here at odd hours?" She adjusted her glasses and gave me a look that was part sympathy, part disappointment. "Tom, dear, I've been wondering when you were going to ask me that question. Started about 3 months ago, always late at night or early in the morning, always when your work truck wasn't in the driveway." 3 months. Right around the time Lena started working late and dressing better and suddenly becoming interested in real estate. "I see," I said. "I hope you do, dear. I really hope you do." I drove to the Morrison job site in a haze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. 3 months of late-night visits. 3 months of my wife sneaking around with my best friend while I was working overtime to save money for the kitchen renovation she'd been wanting. The kitchen renovation for the house where she'd been entertaining another man. Mark was already at the job site when I arrived, measuring twice and cutting once like I'd taught him when he started working for me 5 years ago. "You look like hell," he said by way of greeting. Mark Rodriguez is the best carpenter I've ever worked with, and one of the few people I trust completely. He's got 3 kids, a mortgage, and the kind of steady reliability that makes him worth twice what most contractors pay their crew. He's also got good instincts about people and no patience for bullshit. "Rough night," I said, setting down my tool bag. "Lena still working those long hours?" I looked at him sharply. "Why do you ask?" Mark shrugged. "Sarah mentioned she saw Lena's car at that new coffee place downtown yesterday around lunch. Said she was with some guy in a suit. Figured it was a work thing, but Sarah thought it looked pretty cozy for a business meeting. The new coffee place downtown, 3 blocks from Greg's condo." "Did Sarah say what the guy looked like?" "Tall, good-looking, expensive suit, drove a BMW. Mark paused in his measuring. "Tom, you want to tell me what's going on?" I could have lied, Could have made up some story about work stress or money problems or any of the dozen other things that make married men look like they've been hit by a truck. Instead, I told him everything. The late nights, the suitcases, the cell phone records, Mrs. Krantz's intelligence reports, the coffee shop sighting. Mark listened without interrupting, his expression getting darker with every detail. Jesus Christ, Tom, how long has this been going on? 3 months that I can prove, maybe longer. And it's definitely Greg? Unless there's another BMW driving real estate agent with vanity plates who's been parking outside my house at midnight. Mark set down his tape measure and leaned against the workbench. What are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? What do you do when you discover that your wife of 18 years and your best friend of 25 have been betraying you in the most fundamental way possible? I'm going to document everything, I said. Phone records, witness statements, photographs if I can get them. Then I'm going to confront them with evidence they can't deny. And then? I picked up my circular saw and checked the blade, sharp enough to cut through anything. Then I'm going to destroy them both. That afternoon, I drove to Greg's office during my lunch break. Dalton Real Estate occupied a storefront on Main Street with big windows and Greg's smiling face on every piece of marketing material. I parked across the street and waited. At 12:47, Lena's Honda pulled up in front of the office. At 12:49, Greg came out and got in the passenger seat. At 12:52, they drove away together, Lena laughing at something Greg had said. I followed them to Chez Laurent, the French restaurant where Lena and I had celebrated our 10th anniversary, where we'd talked about having kids and growing old together and all the dreams that now felt like elaborate jokes. I parked where I could see through the restaurant's front window and watched my wife and my best friend share an intimate lunch. Watched Greg reach across the table to touch Lena's hand. Watched Lena lean forward and whisper something that made Greg smile like he'd won the lottery. Watched them kiss. Right there in the window of the restaurant where my wife and I had promised to love each other forever, she was kissing another man, my best friend. The guy who'd been the best man at our wedding and who'd given a speech about how Tom and Lena were proof that true love really existed. I took 17 photographs with my phone. Then I drove back to the Morrison job site and spent the rest of the afternoon demolishing a wall with more enthusiasm than the job strictly required. Feel better? Mark asked when I finally stopped swinging the sledgehammer. Getting there, I said. But I wasn't getting there. I was just getting started. I waited until Friday night to make my move. Lena was working late again, which I now knew meant she was at Greg's condo, probably drinking wine and laughing about how clueless her husband was. I had other plans. At 8:30 p.m., I knocked on Greg's door. He answered wearing khakis and a button-down shirt, the kind of casual but expensive outfit that screams, "I make twice what you make and want everyone to know it." His face went through several expressions when he saw me: surprise, confusion, and finally something that might have been guilt. "Tom, hey buddy, what brings you by?" "We need to talk." "Sure, of course. Come on in. Want a beer?" Greg's condo was everything my house wasn't. Modern, minimalist, expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown, and every piece of furniture looked like it came from a catalog. The kind of place designed to impress visitors, especially female visitors. "Nice place," I said, looking around. "Must be great for entertaining." "Yeah, it works for me. So what's up? You sounded serious." I pulled out my phone and showed him the first photograph from the restaurant. Greg and Lena, holding hands across the table. His face went pale. "Tom, I can explain." "Can you?" I swiped to the next photo. The kiss. "Because I'm really curious to hear how you explain this." Greg sank into his leather couch like someone had cut his strings. "How long have you known?" 3 months of phone records. 3 months of Mrs. Krantz seeing your car at my house. 3 months of my wife lying to my face while she was screwing my best friend. It's not like that. What's it like, Greg? Help me understand. He ran his hands through his hair, and for a moment he looked like the kid I'd grown up with instead of the man who'd been betraying me for months. It just happened, Tom. We were talking at that party at Mark's place, and there was this connection, this spark. We tried to ignore it, but you decided to pursue it anyway. We didn't mean for it to go this far. I laughed, and the sound was bitter enough to cut glass. How far has it gone, Greg? Are you in love with her? Is she leaving me for you? Are you planning to play house in this fancy condo and pretend like 18 years of marriage never happened? She's confused, Tom. She doesn't know what she wants. She seems pretty clear about what she wants. She packed her bags 3 days ago. Greg's head snapped up. She's leaving? You didn't know? Interesting. Maybe you don't know her as well as you think you do. The front door opened, and Lena walked in carrying takeout bags from the Thai place on Elm Street. She was laughing about something until she saw me sitting in Greg's living room. The bags hit the floor. Tom, I can explain. Everyone wants to explain tonight. Nobody wants to tell the truth. Lena looked between Greg and me, her face cycling through the same expressions Greg's had: surprise, confusion, guilt, and finally something that looked like resignation. How long have you known? She asked. Long enough. The question is, how long has this been going on? Tom. How long, Lena? She sat down in the chair across from me, as far from both Greg and me as she could get. Since the party. Since Mark and Sarah's barbecue. 3 months. Yes. 3 months of lying to me. 3 months of sneaking around. 3 months of making me feel crazy for suspecting something was wrong. We didn't want to hurt you. I stood up, and both of them flinched like they thought I was going to hit someone. The thought had crossed my mind, but I'm not that kind of man. I destroy things with precision, not violence. You didn't want to hurt me? Lena, you've been sleeping with my best friend for 3 months. Greg, you've been screwing my wife in the house I've been paying for, but you didn't want to hurt me? Tom, please. Are you in love with him? The question hung in the air like smoke. Lena looked at Greg, then back at me, then down at her hands. I think so, she whispered. And you? I turned to Greg. Are you in love with my wife? Yes, he said. And at least he had the courage to look me in the eye when he said it. I nodded. Then we're done here. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. Lena, I'll have divorce papers drawn up on Monday. Greg, after 25 years of friendship, I never want to see you again. And both of you should know that by tomorrow morning, everyone in town is going to know exactly what kind of people you are. Tom, wait, Lena started. Wait for what? An apology? An explanation? Some bullshit story about how this is all my fault because I work too much or don't pay enough attention to you or whatever justification you've been telling yourselves? I looked at them. My wife and my best friend, sitting in his expensive condo with their Thai food and their guilty faces and their grand love affair that was built on lies and betrayal. You want to be together? Fine. Be together. But don't expect me to make it easy for you. I left them there and drove home to my empty house, where I spent the rest of the night planning their social destruction with the same methodical precision I brought to every construction project. By morning, I had a plan. Sophie Martinez answered her phone on the second ring. Tom, is everything okay? It's 7 a.m. I need to tell you something about Lena, and I need you to hear it from me first. Sophie had been Lena's best friend since college, which made her both the perfect person to confide in and the most dangerous person to cross. She knew everyone in our social circle, had opinions about everything, and possessed the kind of strategic mind that could have made her a successful general if she'd been born in a different century. She was also competitive, jealous, and had never quite gotten over the fact that Lena had married better than she had. What's going on? Lena's been having an affair with Greg Dalton for the past 3 months. She's leaving me for him. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, are you sure? I have photographs, phone records, and witness statements. She admitted it last night. That bitch. I smiled. Sophie's reaction was exactly what I'd expected. She'd been competing with Lena for 20 years. Who had the better job, the nicer house, the more successful husband? Learning that Lena had thrown away her marriage for an affair would trigger every competitive instinct Sophie had. I wanted you to hear it from me before the whole town starts talking. The whole town? Sophie, my wife has been screwing my best friend for 3 months. You think I'm going to keep that quiet? What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people they are, starting with you. By noon, Sophie had called 12 people. By evening, the story had reached every corner of our social circle. By Sunday morning, Lena's phone was buzzing with calls from friends, family members, and co-workers who'd heard various versions of the story. The beauty of small-town gossip is that it doesn't need to be embellished. The truth was scandalous enough. Greg's real estate business started feeling the impact immediately. The Hendersons canceled their listing. The Morettis found a different agent for their house hunt. 3 scheduled showings got mysteriously postponed. Lena's situation was more complicated. She couldn't exactly quit her job, but she could be made to feel unwelcome in every social situation for the foreseeable future. That's where Ruth came in. Ruth Brennan owns Murphy's Tavern, the neighborhood bar where everyone from our crowd goes for drinks, dinner, and the kind of social interaction that makes small towns feel like extended families. She's 68 years old, has been serving beer and dispensing wisdom for 30 years, and commands more respect than the mayor, the police chief, and the high school football coach combined. She also has zero tolerance for people who cheat on their spouses. "Tom Harlan," she said when I walked into Murphy's on Sunday afternoon, "I heard you had some excitement in your life lately." Word travels fast. Faster than you might think. Greg Dalton was in here yesterday, trying to explain his side of the story. Didn't go over well with the crowd. I looked around the bar. Half the people there were friends of mine, guys I'd worked with, neighbors I'd helped with home improvement projects, couples Lena and I had socialized with for years. They were all looking at me with expressions of sympathy and support. What did he say? Something about true love and following his heart, and how sometimes these things just happen. I told him that if he ever set foot in my bar again, I'd have him thrown out on his ass. Ruth poured me a beer without being asked. Lena came by this morning. And? Same treatment. I don't serve people who destroy families. The ban from Murphy's was more devastating than it sounded. In a town like ours, being unwelcome at the central social hub was like being excommunicated. It meant no more birthday parties, no more casual Friday night drinks, no more integration into the community that had been their home for years. "Ruth, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did. I've been watching marriages in this town for 30 years, Tom. I've seen people work through problems, fight for each other, rebuild after mistakes. But I've never seen anything as cold-blooded as what those two did to you." She leaned across the bar, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than shouting. "They didn't just betray you, Tom. They betrayed everyone who believed in your marriage, everyone who trusted them, everyone who thought they were decent people. So, what happens now? Now? Now they get to live with the consequences of their choices, and you get to rebuild your life without them." That night, I sat in my workshop and made a list of everything I needed to do. File for divorce, change the locks, cancel the joint credit cards, remove Lena from my insurance policies, all the practical, mundane tasks that come with dismantling 18 years of shared life. But I also made another list, a list of people who needed to know the truth, a list of ways to make sure Greg and Lena's betrayal followed them wherever they went. I wasn't done with them yet, not by a long shot. The Harvest Festival happens every October in the town square, and it's the kind of event where everyone shows up whether they want to or not. Local businesses set up booths, The high school marching band plays patriotic songs, and the mayor gives a speech about community values that everyone ignores while they eat funnel cake and gossip about their neighbors. This year, I had special plans for the festival. Lena showed up around noon, looking like she was trying to pretend everything was normal. She wore her favorite blue dress and moved through the crowd with the kind of forced confidence that comes from knowing everyone is talking about you behind your back. Greg was nowhere to be seen. Smart man. I waited until the crowd gathered for the annual raffle drawing, the one fundraiser everyone participates in because the prizes are donated by local businesses and the money goes to the volunteer fire department. Mayor Davidson was at the microphone, reading names and making jokes that weren't funny but got polite laughs anyway. That's when I made my move. "Excuse me, Mayor Davidson," I said, walking up to the microphone. "Mind if I make a quick announcement?" The mayor looked confused, but handed over the microphone. 300 people turned their attention to me, including Lena, who had gone pale as soon as she saw me approaching the stage. "Hi, everyone. Tom Harlan here. Most of you know me. I've done work on half the houses in this town over the past 20 years. Murmurs of agreement from the crowd. I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone for their support during this difficult time in my life. As most of you have probably heard by now, my wife Lena has decided to end our 18-year marriage to pursue a relationship with my former best friend, Greg Dalton." The crowd went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop in the town square. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why air your dirty laundry in public? Well, the thing is, they didn't just betray me. They betrayed this entire community. They looked all of you in the eye at parties and barbecues and social gatherings while they were lying and sneaking around behind everyone's backs. I could see Lena pushing through the crowd, trying to get to the stage, her face bright red with embarrassment and fury. So I just wanted everyone to know the truth. Not gossip, not rumors, but the documented, photographed, witnessed truth. Lena Harlan and Greg Dalton have been having an affair for 3 months, and they're planning to build their future together on the foundation of lies and betrayal they've spent so much time constructing. Lena reached the edge of the stage. "Tom, stop this right now." I looked down at her, and for the first time in 3 months, I felt genuinely happy. "Stop what, Lena? Telling the truth? I thought you'd appreciate honesty for a change." The crowd was buzzing now, people turning to their neighbors, phones coming out to record the confrontation. This would be all over social media within the hour. "You're making a fool of yourself," Lena hissed. "No," I said into the microphone, making sure everyone could hear. "You already did that for me." I handed the microphone back to Mayor Davidson, who looked like he wished he'd called in sick that morning, and walked off the stage. The crowd parted in front of me like I was Moses crossing the Red Sea. Behind me, I could hear Lena trying to do damage control, her voice high and desperate as she attempted to explain herself to 300 people who had just watched her humiliation broadcast live. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. That evening, I was in my workshop when Mark stopped by with a 6-pack of beer and a grin that stretched from ear to ear. "Jesus Christ, Tom. The whole town is talking about what you did today. Good or bad? Are you kidding? You're a folk hero. Half the guys at Murphy's want to buy you drinks for the rest of the year." We sat on my workbench, drinking beer and watching the sun set behind the trees that separated my property from Mrs. Krantz's house. "You know this isn't over, right?" Mark said. "Lena's not going to just disappear quietly." "I'm counting on it." "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the text messages that had been coming in all afternoon. Angry messages from Lena. Desperate messages from Greg. Threats, apologies, pleas for understanding, and promises of revenge. "They're panicking," I said. "People who are panicking make mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" "The kind that finish the job I started today." As if on cue, my phone rang. Greg's name appeared on the screen. I answered on speakerphone. "Tom, we need to talk." "I don't think we do, Greg. You humiliated Lena today, in front of the entire town. Lena humiliated herself 3 months ago. I just made sure everyone knew about it. This has gone far enough. I looked at Mark, who was shaking his head in amazement at Greg's audacity. Has it? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like we're just getting started. What do you want? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to know what it feels like to have your life destroyed by people you trusted. And I want everyone in this town to remember what happened when Greg Dalton and Lena Harlan decided that their happiness was more important than everyone else's. Tom. I hung up. Think they'll try something stupid? Mark asked. I hope so, I said. I've got plans for that too. The next morning, I woke up to find my truck's tires slashed and asshole spray painted across my garage door. It was exactly what I'd been hoping for. Chapter 7. The Final Move. I called the police first, then took photographs of the damage from every possible angle. Officer Patricia Wells arrived 20 minutes later with a clipboard and the kind of professional sympathy that cops develop when they deal with domestic disputes on a regular basis. Any idea who might have done this, Tom? I have suspicions, but no proof. This wouldn't have anything to do with that situation at the Harvest Festival yesterday, would it? Word really did travel fast in small towns. Could be related, I admitted. Officer Wells walked around my truck, documenting the damage. 4 slashed tires, deep gouges in the paint, and a cracked windshield. Whoever had done this had been thorough and angry. Tom, I have to ask, is there any chance you did this yourself for insurance purposes or to make your ex-wife look bad? I showed her the security camera I'd installed above my garage 3 days earlier. Check the timestamp. This happened at 2:17 a.m. I was asleep in the house and I can prove it. The security footage was beautiful. Clear images of Greg Dalton and Lena Harlan vandalizing my truck, their faces clearly visible in the motion-activated floodlight I'd also installed earlier that week. Well, Officer Wells said after reviewing the footage, I'd say that's pretty conclusive evidence. What happens now? Now I go have a conversation with Mr. Dalton and Mrs. Harlan about vandalism, destruction of property, and why they thought this was a good idea. I spent the morning getting estimates for the truck repairs and fielding phone calls from neighbors who'd heard about the vandalism. Mrs. Krantz brought me homemade cookies and a lecture about the declining moral standards of younger generations. Mark offered to loan me his truck until mine was fixed. By noon, the whole town knew that Greg and Lena had been arrested for vandalizing my property. By evening, they'd been released on their own recognizance with court dates scheduled for the following month. By the next morning, Greg's real estate license was under review by the state board, and Lena had been placed on administrative leave from her job pending an internal investigation into her conduct issues. I was in my workshop, enjoying the kind of deep satisfaction that comes from a plan executed perfectly, when my phone rang. Sophie Martinez. Tom, you need to know something. What's that? Lena called me this morning crying. She wants to come home. I set down my coffee mug. Come home? She says the whole thing with Greg was a mistake. She says she was confused and stupid and she wants to try to work things out with you. And what did you tell her? I told her she was 3 months too late and about 18 years too stupid. I laughed. Sophie, you're a good friend. I'm not done. She's planning to show up at your house tonight to beg for forgiveness. She thinks if she can just talk to you face to face, she can convince you to take her back. Is that right? Tom, please tell me you're not going to fall for this. Please tell me you're not going to let her manipulate you into giving her another chance. I looked around my workshop, my sanctuary, my kingdom, the place where I'd planned the destruction of 2 people who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. Sophie, do me a favor. Call everyone you can think of and tell them to drive by my house around 8 o'clock tonight. Tell them Lena's going to put on quite a show and they won't want to miss it. What are you planning? Justice, I said, and hung up. At 7:45 p.m., I set up a folding chair in my front yard and waited. At 7:52, cars started parking along my street. Mark and Sarah, the Hendersons from 2 blocks over, Ruth from Murphy's Tavern, Mrs. Krantz with her cane and her sharp eyes. 15, 20, 30 people, all finding reasons to be in the neighborhood at exactly the right time. At 8:03, Lena's Honda pulled into my driveway. She got out of the car wearing the black dress she'd worn to our anniversary dinner 2 years ago, carrying a bottle of wine and what looked like a handwritten letter. Her face was puffy from crying, her hair was perfectly styled, and she moved with the kind of desperate determination that comes from knowing this is your last chance to fix an unfixable situation. "Tom," she called out as she approached my chair, "we need to talk." "I'm listening." She looked around at the growing crowd of neighbors and friends, her face flushing red as she realized we had an audience. "Can we go inside? This is private." "Nothing about our relationship has been private for the past 3 months, Lena. I don't see any reason to start now." She knelt down beside my chair, the wine and letter clutched in her hands like props in a play she'd rehearsed but didn't understand. "I made a terrible mistake. The worst mistake of my life. I was confused and lonely, and I let Greg convince me that what we had was special, but it wasn't. It was just selfishness and stupidity, and I threw away 18 years of marriage for nothing." The crowd was dead silent, hanging on every word. "You threw away 18 years of marriage because you wanted to," I said. "Greg didn't force you to do anything. He didn't hypnotize you or blackmail you or trick you into having an affair. You made a choice, Lena. Every day for 3 months you made the same choice. I know, and I hate myself for it. But we can fix this, Tom. We can go to counseling. We can rebuild trust. We can what? Pretend it never happened? Go back to the way things were before I found out my wife was screwing my best friend?" Tears were streaming down her face now, and part of me, a small, stupid part, almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I love you," she whispered. "I've always loved you. What I had with Greg wasn't love. It was just, I don't know what it was, but it wasn't love." "Then what was it?" She looked around at the crowd, at the neighbors and friends who had watched our marriage for 18 years and were now watching its public execution. "It was a fantasy, a stupid, selfish fantasy about being someone different, someone more exciting, someone who deserved better than—" She trailed off, but I knew how the sentence ended. Someone who deserved better than me. "Lena," I said, standing up from my chair, 3 days ago you told me you were in love with Greg. Yesterday you and Greg vandalized my truck because you were angry about facing consequences for your choices. Today, you're kneeling in my front yard telling me it was all a mistake. It was a mistake. The only mistake here is thinking I'm stupid enough to believe you." I walked toward my front door, then stopped and turned back to address the crowd as much as Lena. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is what manipulation looks like. This is what someone does when they realize they've destroyed their safety net and they want to climb back into it. Lena Harlan doesn't love me. She loves the idea of not having to face the consequences of her actions." Lena was sobbing now, her carefully planned reconciliation falling apart in front of 30 witnesses. "Tom, please. The divorce papers will be ready next week. Don't contact me again." I went inside and locked the door, leaving Lena kneeling in my front yard with her wine and her letter and her audience of former friends who had just watched her beg for forgiveness she didn't deserve. Through my living room window, I watched her sit there for another 10 minutes, crying and clutching that stupid letter, while the crowd gradually dispersed and went home to tell their families about the show they'd just witnessed. Finally, she got back in her Honda and drove away. I poured myself a beer and sat in my kitchen, surrounded by 18 years of shared memories and the deep satisfaction of a job well done. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "That was the most brutal thing I've ever seen. Remind me never to cross you." I typed back, "She had it coming," And she did. They both did. Greg Dalton lost his real estate license 2 weeks later and moved to Boston to start over. Lena finished out her notice at MedTech Solutions and took a job in Hartford, 40 miles away from the town where everyone knew her story. I kept the house, kept my business, and kept my dignity. 6 months later, I was having a beer at Murphy's when Ruth leaned across the bar and asked if I was ready to start dating again. Maybe, I said, but next time I'm going to be a lot more careful about who I trust. Smart man, she said. You learned the hard way, but you learned. I raised my beer in a toast to the empty bar stool where Greg used to sit, back when I thought friendship meant something. Here's to learning the hard way, I said, and I meant every word.